Oh, he's setting the mood.
All right. Hey, there we are. We are live. Hey, welcome all you freedom-loving boys and girls. We are your hosts for tonight. This is episode 2 or part 2 of our class on go bags, gear, and getting there. We're not going to relitigate or go over anything from episode 1, just because you can go back and watch it. So we're just going to kind of dive right into episode 2. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start, because there's probably only a handful of people even watching right now, but I do want to, know who I am. I'm Marks. I own Centerline Systems. Go see some of the other videos of our backgrounds and stuff. But we are doing a charity auction over there. So I just want to give a plug and a shout out for our charity auction. So if you don't mind, you're already over here on Centerline Systems, just check out charity auction number 4. It's our last one. And, make a comment. There's already somebody who sent me text message, all these funny jokes. They just got to start doing it in the video though, so everybody else can read it as well. All right. Hey, without further ado, what we're going to do here tonight, and I'm going to change our view real quickly. So we kind of, in our pregame, after talking about this, we realized, again, we're training to standards, not to time, but we also know that this was originally designed to be a half day or a full day class. That's not going to work. If you're on the East Coast or something, we know it's late. So we're probably only going to focus on food, fire, water, and shelter tonight. And then we'll do a part 3 where we'll do the other part of the 4 food groups, which is shoot, move, communicate, and medicate. Now, as we start jumping into tonight's discussion, I just want to reiterate some ground rules, and then Redbeard's got some really cool stuff to say. But ground rules, it's pretty basic. We're doing this for you. So leave a comment. We've got Spoon over in the back room. He's staying on top of the chat. If you ask a great comment, or if you want to, we'll bring you on to the live stream, and it'll be one of your faces. Maybe you got a beard as good as mine, or Redbeard's, or Paul's. But we'll bring you on board, and you can present your comment and conversation to everyone else, because otherwise it's just 3 talking heads, and we don't want that to be 3 talking heads. So leave comments. But if you're disrespectful, or if you act like a bag of Richards, we're just going to boot you, right? This is a free class. Not a single one of us says we're experts on any of this stuff. So, and if you want to know about our backgrounds, go see some of our previous videos, and then we'll just go from there. But Jeremy, in the pregame, as we were kind of rehearsing and figuring out how we're going to do tonight, had a really good point. And so we're going to turn this over before we even start it and going into Jeremy. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So we had a discussion, both me and Mark, and then later with Paul, once Paul got involved into the pregame. Basically, one of the biggest things that we want to reiterate, and I want to preface also that I'm not going to provide like any specifics as it pertains to the subject, but rather I just want to drive home a couple different points here. So the primary point, I guess, is when you look at everything that we're going to get into tonight, and then also what's going to be in the ensuing next phase of this class, if you will, is there's an underlying theme of physical fitness. Physical fitness is absolutely it's absolutely vital to being able to do the best that you possibly can, whether it's creating shelter, going out and foraging for food, starting a fire, and other basic survival necessities, if you will. And I think it's one of the areas that is also one of the most overlooked. There's a lot of people that feel that they can confidently just throw on a pack and walk out in the woods and just say, yeah, no, we're just gonna make this happen. And I'm here to tell you, as somebody who's used a lot of different kinds of gear, who's been on longer trips and stuff like that through varied terrain, like you have to build your body up to it. If you think that you're going to just throw on some stuff, I'm here to tell you, you're a walking injury waiting to happen.
As somebody who's paying the price for it, having done that, I'm going to emphasize what Redbeard just said. If you think you're just going to do that, so again, see the previous video. It has a lot to do with mindset and being brutally honest with yourself. Yeah. I'm in a physical situation because of the lifestyle I led and the training I went through. Because to Jeremy's point, if you think you're just going to throw an 80-pound rucksack on your back and you're just going to head off in the woods, hey, good luck with that. But that's not the reality. And we have to be brutally honest. We're having fun here, but this is a serious conversation. And Redbeard is right. And I think once we get into the third part of this, when we start actually going into well, it's evident in all of this, but the shoot, move, communicate, medicate, you know, you have to have that physical fitness. So not trying to steal your thunder, Redbeard.
No, yeah.
I had my mic on mute. I was just laughing. I'm like, oh, because I love it. It's like, oh, I'm just going to do this. I'm like, have you ever thrown 80 pounds on your back and walked 20 miles through the woods or even on a road? Okay, you tell me how that's going to work for you for the very first time you do it. So
yeah, no, and I think you just further that point too, right? Because in the end of the day, it's like there needs to be a nice complement of strength and conditioning. Because look, the reality of it is it comes down to even just basic life things, right? Like if you're, and I'm going to use kind of just a very common thing. If you're a parent and you have a kid in a stroller and that stroller starts to, you know, run away from you, and you don't have the pushing off power to get a decent distance to that stroller before it makes it into the intersection, I mean, that's inherently, like, that's to some degree, like, that's problematic. And it's the same thing. Like, if you don't have enough strength to be able to do basic things, if you don't have enough conditioning to be able to deal with basic things, it's going to hinder your overall ability to perform in the way that we should perform. I mean, our bodies are mechanically inclined to do so many great things, and to not set ourselves up for success that way, we're only diminishing our ability to survive situations. So,
and that's going to become evident in this module and the next part 3, because I think that, and that's why we're kind of starting off this way tonight, is because it really is. Again, go back and watch part 1. I mean, I'm brutally honest with myself about the odds of my survival last winter here in northern Minnesota, given my physical limitations. Paul, let's bring this over to you because you had some comments along these lines as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that physical fitness is the foundation to all of this. However, it is either age or physical condition appropriate. Right now, the stuff that I can do, I could do much more decades ago. So what I try and do is I'll carry a little bit of extra weight. If I'm just hiking or going out for the day or something, I'll put a little extra weight in the pack just to get myself in better condition. If there's, bringing out a salt lick for a deer, I'll put that in my backpack. That thing's heavy. So you put that in there, and I struggle with that. But then when I'm actually going to be carrying something real that I need, it's going to feel lighter to me. Also, having the appropriate backpack and setup. At the same time, I'm moving, if possible, away from backpacks during the day and using, things like the GCC and the Scout bottle carrier, because it distributes the weight better. It's not on my back. I'm in an area with high humidity. Backpacks are you're sweating in 5 seconds. Yeah. So, all that. And then, physical fitness, keeping yourself hydrated. And I guess I'm going a little too far on this, but the key thing is you need to have a little bit, just go out and see what your capabilities are before you decide you're going to carry around 80 pounds, because you're not going to be able to do it. I definitely couldn't right now.
Yeah.
And I just see a note that I messed up already, and I said a bag of Richards. It's apparently a satchel of Richards. So I've already been scolded by somebody in the chat or somewhere. So I apologize. It is a satchel of Richards, not a bag of Richards. And then now moving on. So here we go. Now we're going to jump into it. I think you just heard from us 3. Yeah. Look, we're just knuckleheads. We put our pants on just like everyone else. But I think the one, strength, if you want to say, that we all bring to the table is we're all pretty brutally honest people. And so if you're here, watching this, thank you. And we definitely appreciate it. Again, leave comments, jump in. If you think we're totally wrong, then we'll bring you on and you can say, oh no, you don't have to be physically fit to survive. And, okay, make your argument. I think we're all disagreeing, but now I'm moving in. So we're going to focus on everybody. You'll hear a lot of people call it different things, whether it's 10 C's or get home or the hierarchy of needs. I call it the 4 food groups, even though there's 8 topics in my mind, but we're going to kind of focus again on food, fire, water, shelter here in this module, the hierarchy of needs. Now you're all adults. You can read this as we're talking. But the key element that I want to point out, and then we'll see what Redbeard and Paul think, is, my main point to make here in the hierarchy of needs is it's all contingent on your circumstances. And you need to look at again, go back to the first module. You need to look at all these other variables and then figure out a system, create your own, listen to what we said and put it in your hip pocket and tweak it and make it yours. but it's going to be contingent on every individual. There's nothing cookie cutter about any of this.
Right.
You know, so here, kind of having a little bit of fun. Paul just mentioned some gear I make. All right, that was an awesome plug. I didn't pay him for that. But
way to go, Paul.
But the reason I'm highlighting that is because look at your hierarchy of needs. Paul just, again, we didn't plan this. Paul just perfectly demonstrated what this slide is, right? Yeah. He has to look at the circumstances, and he made decisions looking at the pros and cons of, well, should I have a rucksack, or can I just do this with my GCC or my, you know, my Mod Deuce or, you know, my Scout bottle carrier type of thing. And then if you look on the example, and then I'm going to turn it over to these guys so you can hear their voices, not just mine the whole time, but look at, again, what is it that you are going to be, what are you really going to need to do? I live in northern Minnesota. Getting water isn't going to be an issue here. It's the land of 10,000 lakes, but starting a fire, dude, you're going to need fire. We were just joking in the pregame, and Paul, he's laughing. Like, we made a joke of, like, actually it snowed here last week. And he's like, what? But that's actually true. It has snowed in June in Minnesota. Like, so shelter and fire are going to be scored much higher than water, because there's water everywhere. You can't even shake a stick. But that goes into later, into move, because how are you going to move when it's a land of 10,000 lakes and there's lakes and streams and bogs and swamps and all that stuff going on? All right, fellas, I think everybody else can read this. Do you guys want to maybe take that last question and then go with it for a second? Like, you know, how are you going to mitigate these things? Anybody want to jump in?
You want to take it first, Paul, or you want me to?
You want me to put it back up?
Oh,
so we're talking about natural threats. So, you know, to me, I see that and I'm thinking, all right, well, we have the environment, we have Mother Nature, we have weather, we have animals. You need to know your location. And if you're going to a different location, make sure you know what you're getting into. One thing, and I did see something in there about snakes. You know, you can, for the most part, most mammals, you can either hear or they're going to stay away from you. A snake will try and stay away from you as well, but you may stumble along one. And if you're in an area with poisonous snakes, you need to be careful. You can carry around an anti-venom, but and again, I'm not saying I'm 100% sure, but I do believe that that's a temporary solution until you can get medical care. So you want to carry that with you. Just know that you're going to have to be able to be in a position to get rescued.
You know, so
100%.
I'm glad you just said that. I'm not making this up. It just reminded me of a time when I was still in high school. And we were on a summer trip, you know, through the school, you know, a bunch of kids and a few counselors or teachers, and we're out in the BWCA. And myself and one other student who had the most quote unquote outdoor experience. So again, you know, if you're out in Minnesota, if you know that there's portages, right? So here's a lake, and then there's a trail going to the next lake, and you paddle to the portage, you unload everything from the canoes, and you just hump everything to the next lake, and then you get in your canoes and go. But that portage had been, we couldn't find it. Like, there had been a flood, or the lake had flooded, you know, things of this nature. So the teacher sent me and this other kid to find a suitable trail where we could portage into the next lake. And the mosquitoes were so bad, I almost panicked. I mean, they were like, imagine like 100 or more mosquitoes suddenly on your face. I mean, and I'd heard stories as a kid of people who like encountered that stuff. So you've got to take these things into consideration in your planning when you're talking about gear and go bags, because if you're here in northern Minnesota and your option is that you're just going to bug out, okay, well then you better have some bug juice and a bug net, because there's a shit ton of bugs out there. And right now, black flies, horse flies, deer flies, and mosquitoes are absolutely, they potentially can drive you crazy. I literally was maybe one of the first or second moments in my life where I had this sense of awareness and I took a breath, you know, even though it's just covered in bugs. I reached in my pocket, I got my bug net, I put it on my head, I squished all the bugs on my face, and I prevented but I almost panicked. So that's what we're kind of going with here when you talk about your hierarchy needs, but you got to figure out how you're going to mitigate those threats. And that's where I was kind of bringing it over to you and Paul. Redbeard, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, actually, and I can draw from experience in setting up like bushcrafting camps and even just camps in general. But my rule of thumb, usually when I'm setting up something, if you can do it, it's not always a guarantee, but if you're able to, my thing is I've always tried to find some type of rock to have as one of my walls. I like to have walls as a natural barrier. I also have constructed with some of my my lean-tos, my A-frames, is also taking the natural like the timbers and stuff like that, and building kind of like a faux wall. So what that does is it provides you a sense of security. So if you have any type of predators around or whatever, it mitigates the potential for them to get in. But the plus side for having one of those walls being rock is if you're, camping, as I have numerous times during the winter or the fall, or even like, very, very early spring, it acts as a natural heat reflector. So you can retain that heat in your, in your sleeping area, and it keeps you a lot warmer as a result. Now, one thing that I will say is be mindful of the rocks that you do have around your fire, because some of them can explode depending on what and it's no BS. Like I've seen people like after actions from a camp out, and they're like, yeah, I thought this was good to go because they used it as a ring, and they've caught shrapnel and stuff like that. But rocks, having a natural wall or some type of barriers is awesome.
So here's a cool thing of what you just said, though. We're already kind of jumping into shelters, but if we go back to the slide deck, what we're really talking about. So I hope if you're watching this, or whenever you watch us, whoever is watching, like already in this conversation, we're 16 minutes into the podcast, but you already hear 3 adults, pretty rational, adults having a rational conversation and realizing it. Yeah, it isn't just as easy as just walking out there and doing this. Yeah. Like that's the thing. If there's anything I hope everyone takes away is, if you think you're just going to walk out in the woods and do this, well, let me know where you're going to be, John Wayne, so I can be someplace else. Cause that's kind of not how life works. Right. So let's move on here. So again, the hierarchy of needs, Jeremy's point, which will come up again, I think in shelter. So again, you might have to consider what type of shelter you're going to make based on the environment you're in. So again, go back 100%. And see episode 1. And that's a great point. See how we're already doing this and we're not even into it. So there's just a picture from somewhere in my past, and look at what we're eating. I honestly should have a different picture in the slide deck, and it shows me this was a long deployment, and I look like something. And I'm not disparaging anybody who went through it or had a family member went through it. I don't mean it that way. And I'm not saying I was in Auschwitz, but I was so emaciated. So food, just take that Alone series or whatever it's called. Look at how much those guys suffer, being out in out in that environment and not being able to eat food. I was eating goat meat and peppers for like 6 fucking months. It was rough. It was rough, dude. So, but it's a really important thing. And, so everybody can read this, as we're talking. So I'm not going to read the slides. So again, if you wonder how we're going to do this class, this course, see the last one, sometimes maybe we'll read it, but you're adults, you can read. It's really more of an opportunity to interact with you and have conversations. So again, I just mentioned that show, and I apologize if I got it wrong. It's Alone, isn't it? Or is it?
I believe so. I think it's Alone.
It's Alone, right?
It's Alone. Yeah.
But just even think about that. So these guys, they're vying for, whatever it is. I can't remember if it's like $500,000. It's a couple $100,000.
It's a chunk of change. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pretty penny. And, and they only get to carry certain, so much gear with them. Right. So when you're thinking food, one of the most important, train to task, not to standard.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, YT censorship. Good job. Good job, sir. That was awesome.
Yep.
But yeah, it's to that point. I mean, so you think about how you're going to even eat. So when we're talking about go bags, gear, and getting there, is your mission that you're going to procure food along your route? Are you going to like bug out and go into the woods and then you're going to just hunt and fish the whole time? Or are you carrying all this food with you? And then, because every time, if you're carrying all this food with you, every time you eat a meal, you're depleting yourself. And so like in the special forces world, when you're going through selection or Q, they don't consider your water weight and your food weight, because that's stuff that you're going to consume. It's actual weight that's in your rucksack. And the reason I'm bringing that up is just like everything else in your rucksack, this isn't Star Trek. The moment you use something, you've lost it. You no longer have that. So how are you going to procure food? And then, so therefore, and I'll shut up here in a second and Jeremy and Paul can chime in. But so what does that mean to you? Are you going to be hunting? Are you going to be fishing? Are you going to be snaring? Do you even know how to do any of these things? Have you even started a fire, which is, part of this module, but how are you going to cook it? Is it going to be, are you going to be using a camp stove? Well, okay. How much gas are you going to carry or fuel? Or can you replenish the fuel? Because once you use it, it's gone. Whereas again, northern Minnesota, there's fuel everywhere. You might live in a part of the world or even a part of America where there's burn bans. So you can't even go out camping and start a fire, right? So what is it that you're going to do? What are the tools that you're going to carry with you? And how are you going to go about your food procurement? Because if you don't think you need food, what is it? 3 days without water, 30 days without food, or 3 weeks or something like that. Yeah. Again, I referenced that show. None of those people, they just hunker down. And some of them, it's just all about, I'm just going to try to burn as many or fewer calories and outlast the other. It's not actually survival. Well, I guess it is. Again, I'm not disparaging any of those guys. I mean, fuck, I wouldn't do that because I couldn't do it. I'm not going to go without food for 60 days. That's stupid. I'm not going to do it. That's not me. Yeah. Do you guys have anything you want to add in here? And now I want to just point out one thing before you guys chime in. The bottom one, and for everybody watching, some things are must-haves and some things are nice-to-haves. And if you go again, you got to leave your ego at the door. Maybe you don't really need it. However, I'm just going to say this from personal experience. Sometimes a nice-to-have actually is a must-have because it's the thing that psychologically, because it's mindset, it's the thing that psychologically carries you to the next day. So just kind of throwing that out there. All right, fellas, who wants to chime in and add to this?
I could take it first real quick, unless Paul wants to go.
We'll come to you, Redbeard, and then we'll go to Paul.
Yeah, so there's a couple points I just want to hit on real quick. And Mark,
if you want to see the slide again for what you're saying, just chime in and I'll bring the slide back.
So you made a couple good points that I'm actually going to play off of. So you brought up calories first, right? Calories do factor into the fitness portion of it, right? Because it's not, yes, being fit is a huge component of it, but our bodies require calories. Calories are, for those who don't know, you're talking about carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Your body needs these. And that being said, in addition with water, of course, but that being said, I also want to reiterate another thing too. If you're planning on going hunting, you need to be mindful too of the fact that not all proteins are the same. Not all fats are the same. So if you're going to hunt, if you think you're going to subsist off a rabbit, I'll be the first one to tell you that while rabbit is a good temporary solution, it should not be the primary food source that you're going to pick if you're actually intending to subsist for a decent amount of time. You have to go after something bigger and something that's going to be more plentiful, like fish or whatever.
So if I can just chime in there, just not stealing thunder. That's a great point. I want you to go on that. So again, when you're planning this, when you're thinking about it, like, okay, there's an abundance of rabbits in my area, but that's not going to be enough. So maybe I want to throw something in my rucksack, like kipper snacks or sardines. That's 100%. I just wanted to add that. Go ahead, Jeremy. Sorry.
No, and that's a great point that you made, because look, food selection is huge. Like, in that part of that is also getting intel or information on the area that you're going to be in. Or look, you could be in a totally different state. You don't know where your area is, but it's one of those things to where I feel like, and I could be wrong about this, and Mark, you could probably let me know, but you can kind of surmise the type of animals that may be in a given area depending on the type of terrain features that are there. Depending on how high or low in the terrain features, it may be a little bit more big game. Some areas don't host small game as well, but I digress. That's just something to keep in mind. So doing your due diligence. And Mark, you actually hit on another good point, and I'm just going to kind of reiterate on this, and then I'll let Paul take it. Comfort items, 100%. You've got to have some type of comfort items. I'm not a big chocolate person, but anytime I go out on the trail, whether it's a day hike, a couple days, or if I'm actually going on a week, I'll bring chocolate. I'll bring something that's just going to be comforting. Coffee, I like coffee. I like things that are going to keep that morale and that mood up, because there's a direct correlation of, if your body starts to go, your mind goes. If your mind goes, your body goes. So you got to keep some type of synchronicity here in symbiosis in order to kind of persist. So I'm going to yield.
Yeah, but Spoon just brought up a comment someone made. Steve,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely,
100%.
Edibles. Yeah,
Wild wintergreen is awesome. By the way.
So here again, checking your ego at the door. Going
Yep.
back to the first episode, that is an area I'm weak in, and I really want to get better at. Plain and simple. I want to know how to forage a lot better. So,
yeah,
and that goes into food procurement, which is what we're talking about. Paul, what do you got, sir?
So I do have my own thoughts, but I want to go into the edible plants. Just be careful. My philosophy is, if there is a something that looks similar that's poisonous than what you think it is, don't eat it. Okay, that's just, unless you absolutely know what it is, definitely go there. But yeah, the book, absolutely, Steve. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
I was thinking while Redbeard was talking about, it depends on the situation too. Are we bugging in? Are we bugging out? As far as food goes, we keep canned goods and canning and all those type of foods for here. If we're here, if we're leaving, now we got to determine, well, whether can we carry that food with us? Are we in a car? Is it a backpack? How much can you actually carry in a backpack? And then, as Redbeard had mentioned, now you're hunting for your own food. Can you do that? Are you capable? And I'm hoping that in my situation we have neighbors that complement each other. We have friends that complement each other. Some people have skill sets in there, and others have in other areas. And that goes down to the tribe mentality, where you need to also work together. You can't do this all your own. You're not going to be able to hunt enough rabbits to feed your family if you have a family. Well, you might be able to for a little bit, but I sure as heck couldn't. So I know that my skill set is not there. I'm elsewhere.
Hey, you just brought up a great point, and and if I were to teach this class again or do this again in the future, I mean, I think one of the things I would emphasize is what you just said is you're not doing this by yourself, right? You know, if you think you're like, I mean, again, just reference that show that we're talking about. Everybody knows. Again, I might be screwing up the title of it, but look at these individuals who are very well trained, very well equipped. They're not as properly equipped as like maybe you or I could be if we, because again, they've got limitations. That's what makes the show. But imagine what they could do if there was 2 or 3 of them together. I think they wouldn't be, what do they say? I'm trying to thrive, not survive. I think if there was 2 or 3 of those individuals together, they would be thriving, right? You'd be like 6 months later, they're like, okay, see you guys in 6 more months. They'd probably have like a mansion fort built by then, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's a really good point right there, Paul, that I would bring up in the future, which is, individual survival, it definitely can be done, but look throughout history and look at examples of people who've survived individually. It's usually pretty rare, and it's incredibly, and they're always incredible stories that always impress us because it's that fucking tough, I think. Right.
Yep.
All right. Going into the next slide, unless you guys got anything to add to that.
The only thing I'm going to add to, and I hate to even harp on it, but we harp on information and knowing your area. How many people are actually familiar with what time of year is better to actually hunt rabbits for the amount of meat that you get? It sounds tiny, but look, it makes a big difference. I've hunted quite a bit of rabbit growing up, and I can tell you that. The first couple of hunts when you got the right time of year and the wrong time of year.
Well, no, no, those are great things. You have to, so that goes into the know your environment. Again, hierarchy of needs, know your environment, because there might be a caribou, or a run or a rut or a season, where you're going to have to take advantage, and that's going to be the time of plenty. And then you're going to have to then know again what we haven't quite talked about, right? I think it's the next
feast
slide.
And famine.
Yeah, well, but then you're going to have to know how can I preserve that? So again, are you 100%. Just to Paul's point, are we bugging in or are we bugging out? And if we're bugging in and we're relying on nature around us to augment the things that we have in our house, okay, well then do I know how to can food, right? So I'm kind of jumping ahead, right? We're just already saying this. Shelf life, MREs, again, we already talked about the slide. Everybody can read it as we're talking, but no, Jerry, that is exactly the point. Did you see the slide deck ahead of time? Because how did you know what to say we were going to say next?
Hey,
but
then the other point, I mean, just look at this again.
do you raise your own animals? I know people who have chickens and pigs, and like, and I think many of us, and Paul, I kind of am setting you up for this one. Many of us wish that we were doing that, but very few of us actually go out and do it. Right. So Paul, I mean, do you want to kind of jump on this? Like, this is kind of your wheelhouse here, I think.
Chickens? Yeah. My wife and I raise chickens.
Well, domesticated animals, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely time consuming, but well worth it. We haven't had to buy a dozen eggs in a year, and we just started last year doing this because we finally had the time to do it. And it's been great. Now we have so many eggs, we can actually share and possibly sell, those type of situations. And that gets into the bartering. So maybe I have somebody that is better at butchering one of the chickens if we need a chicken than I am, or can teach me how to do it. I can, pay in eggs. And it may sound silly, but those type of things can go a long way in there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the whole part. So if you look at it, are you going to forage for food? And again, do you know your edibles? And like Steve said, get a book. Damn right. If nothing else, have the resource, right? Like there's books on butchering, on how to butcher a wide variety of animals, from like, cows and pigs to deer. And, I think I'm also kind of thrown out there. This is another reason. It's kind of tied into the shoot part from that we'll do in the next episode. But it's the same thing. What does shoot mean to you? Is it personal defense or is it hunting, gathering food? Is it easier to procure ammunition, or is it easier to procure crossbow bolts or, arrows for your recurve or your compound bow, and what are you going to do? And are certain of those tools better than the others? But you're going to have to obtain food. Fishing. Do you even know what, hey, is that a good fish to eat? Is there even a fish in this river right now? I mean, like, right. This is much more complicated, I think, than people give it any thought. Give it thought. Oh, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to live off the land. Have you ever even gone out and lived off the land for just even 3 days? Like, shit. So, all right. Anybody got anything to add to this? Otherwise, I think that's kind of, I think that pretty much says it. We can move on to the next one. Anybody got anything to add?
I think I'm good.
Paul, good?
I'm good.
Well, I will just say this, though. I liked your thing about domesticated chickens. I mean, then like the one thing so to that point, I'll just add this. So there is a way to extend the shelf life of even an egg. And that's something that I want to try this year. I don't really believe you can do it with store-bought eggs. So, and again, full disclosure, not telling you what to do. And I don't even know what I'm doing in this. I just know it can be done. But my understanding is, store-bought eggs that's bleached, so they look, that's not how eggs come out. But if you do it with a natural egg, there is like a water bath type of solution that you can do. And it doesn't have to be refrigerated, but it adds this additional coating, and your eggs can last up to 3 months. So that is something, because I have a couple friends who do their own chickens. And next time I see them, I'm going to try to grab a couple dozen eggs, and I'm going to experiment with this and see how it works. So
you can definitely, if you do not, the store-bought eggs, the cleaning process destroys their capability of protecting themselves. So you have to refrigerate them. And the ones that my chickens give us, they're good for at least 30 days. They might be, I'd have to check with my wife. They might be even longer than that. They don't have to be refrigerated. We keep them refrigerated just to keep them even longer than that. Now the water part, we haven't tried that yet. So
it's a solution with water and I think vinegar. And again, don't anyone quote me. I just recently found this out like maybe 6 months ago, and it's been in my brain. I'm like, oh, I really want to try doing this. So but there he goes. But it's food, right? So again, what is your plan? How are you doing it? And because food is a vital thing. So you got to start asking yourself these kind of questions. And in this day and age, with even just, again, remember that how expensive eggs were just like 6 months ago, and I think that's actually what it was. It's like, wow, a dozen eggs are like $5 or whatever the hell it was. So then you start asking yourself and realizing, hey, some of these skills and these thoughts don't just pertain to absolute survival, bugging out or bugging in, but just your day-to-day grind. Because, hey, if eggs are $5 a dozen, can I actually find some in my community where I can get them cheaper and there's something I can do and make them last longer? So that's where I'm kind of going with that. So I like that. Thank you, Paul, for adding to that.
100%.
All right, now we're going into Fire and Light. That's just a cool picture on the shore of Minnesota with a nice little, the shore of Lake Superior here in northern Minnesota on a nice moonlit night and a fire. and just hopefully get you into thinking about. All right, what do we got? Anything metal, pots, canteens, not replaceable in the wild. Yeah, unless you know how to forge things, Mish, you are absolutely right. But and actually, that kind of goes into a different class. Maybe that's something that kind of just jumping and responding to that. Maybe that's a skill you or one of your buddies want to start tinkering with.
Right.
Because if you could start making some of your own tools, and if we're talking a worst case type of scenario, I mean, think about that. Every time you use a nail, you don't get it back, unless you pull a board apart and do it. So you might have to it might behoove you. You can't learn everything, but maybe you learn some basic metallurgy, right? But now we're going into fire. And so as we kind of talked, everybody can see the slide deck as we're talking here. I'm going to actually let Redbeard, because again, we pulled the trick on Paul and told him it was snowed here last week, which isn't actually very far from the truth.
It's not out of sorts.
But you got to ask yourself. So again, you got to think about what's the environment that you are currently in. Is this the environment you're going to remain in? Or are you going to be in a different environment? Are you going to migrate to another location? Again, what is the scenario? That's up to you. Right. If you think it's zombie apocalypse or whatever it is, but you got to start asking yourself these questions. Is there even any type of what? Well, first and foremost, and I'm just going to do a quick little story. I think it was 2 years ago. I saw somebody who I actually follow on Instagram. I really like, and he's big into, pots and kettles and cooking outdoors. And one of the posts he was just teaching his kids how to do a fire, and they were just having a fire and they were making a brew, right? They were making coffee or tea or whatever they were doing. And he got and a bunch of people said negative things. And I'm just I was just sitting there like, do you people, the guy's making these negative comments? Yeah, he's in his backyard. Who cares if he's in his backyard? He's teaching his kids how to make a fire. Like, I really kind of sometimes wonder, have you ever tried making a fire when the wood is wet or it's raining outside? I've actually done that. I've made fires in a rainstorm. So it can be done. But do you have that skill? And going back to what we're talking about here, check your ego at the door and go out there and practice this and rehearse this. I can't throw an 80-pound rucksack on my back anymore, but I can make a fucking, excuse me. I don't know why I just covered my mouth like I'm not in front of anybody. But I can make a fire. I know that was my personal, that was my coming through there. I was like, oops. But you got to learn how to do this stuff. So you got to, again, be honest. Ask yourself what you can do and what's the environment you're in. If you live in a desert and fire is, look, I'm here to tell you, deserts get really freaking cold. Coldest I've ever been in my life was a desert in the Middle East. I've never even been that cold in northern Minnesota. It was the coldest I ever was, because it's different. It's a different environment, but it's a desert. So you got to know, well, what can I burn? Because to what Jeremy's point, or maybe it was Paul's point, because some things aren't edible and some things can release toxic fumes. And you got to know how to do it. And what is this tree? Is that a cedar tree? Is that a birch tree? Is it a popple tree? Can I use this for tinder? Does this burn longer? Does this burn faster? Is this good? You got to really, I know it sounds stupid, but you have to think about it. Okay. Steve's back. Fat wood and birch bark. Yeah. Roger that. Steve. Yeah. Yep. Here's where I kind of want to go with it. And then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So, light, it's fire and light, right? So there's man-made light, headlamps, torches, whatever. If you want, actually, I really actually do want to make, that's another thing for me. I actually want to make real torches, like from, like you see in the old movies, Game of Thrones or The Witcher. I actually love that idea of having a torch, and walking through the woods with a torch. But the modern vernacular, a torch is a flashlight in some parts of the world. But so those things require power, right? And that power is usually in the form of a battery. So how many batteries do you have? Can you come up with a substitute that works just as good? And to like Steve's point, is there something I could do with like birch bark and pine pitch? And could I make an improvised light source? Or the other part I wanted to make here is primitive skills. You see a lot of people talking about bow drills and things of that nature. Well, I'm not picking on bow drills. It's definitely a skill. If you have the time and you want to learn how to master it, do it. I did it way back in the day and I stopped ever caring, because Bic lighters, I hate to say it. Yeah. Someone could say, well, what if your Bic lighter was wet, or, whatever. I'm like, yeah, I totally understand that. But the thing, I can carry 5 Bic lighters. It doesn't cost me any money. It doesn't take up any space. And I can start a fire immediately with that thing. Now, to that point, that bow drill is probably warming up my core as I'm doing it, because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort, right?
Yep.
You know, just like, you know, like we were said in the pregame, you know, cutting firewood, and this is where I'll shut up. Firewood, some people will say, well, firewood heats you up twice, you know, once when you cut it and then when you burn it. And I harvest my own wood, produce my own firewood in my old place. And I don't think that mathematically is correct. It's more like it warms you up like 10 times. You know, you got to walk out to the woods. That's one thing. Then you got to find your tree. You got to fell the tree. Then you got to limb the tree. Then you got to get all the limbs away from the tree. And you might even cut some of those limbs up, or you're making them into brush piles. Then you got to quarter the tree. Then you got to drag it out of the woods, even if that's on a wheeler or whatever. You got to drag it out, throw it up on your rack, buck it up into, you know, 16-inch, and then cut, you know, split all that stuff you bucked up, then move that to your storage site, and then move it from the storage site, because it's going to sit there for a year to season, then move it to your homestead, and then from the wherever you store it, you know, on your porch, into your fireplace. Firewood, harvesting your own firewood is a lot of work. And Jeremy, Tracy, we've done that, starting a fire in Rainstone. Yeah, awesome, Tracy. Yeah, good for you. And then to Steve's point, ferro rods. That's another thing, because that will start a fire. And I've got ferro rods that are, I don't know, do they last forever? I swear, I think they do. But Jeremy, going back to what we were just saying here about wood fire, I know you've got kind of something to say again, because the physical fitness part of it.
Yep. Yeah. So there's, I kind of hate to harp on this, but I'm going to anyways. It comes back to, like, so now you're getting into a means of production, right, Mark? So what we have is, now you have a physical fitness aspect of it. Now you have a fuel consumption aspect of it, fuel being like calories and food and stuff like that. So now you have to think, okay, if it, you know, it might not be as much of a concern depending on your situation, but if you're out and you're doing stuff and you only have an allotted amount of food, you have to be mindful, okay, this may be a better time during the day to procure this. This might not be as good of a time. This is going to do this amount of work, so maybe we should divvy up into working teams if you have more than one person, which, you know, like we were mentioning, is usually a good thing to have, especially if it's a kind of a crappy situation. But it all takes effort. It all takes work. You've got to have certain levels of mobility. Hitting on something that was brought up before, knowing the types of woods, the differences between how softwoods burn versus hardwoods. There's different methodologies, whether it's a Bic lighter or a ferro rod. There's a lot of considerations to think about. Now, I will say that the hardest thing I ever did was starting a fire in -40. If you ever want to know how quick your motor skills go, they go quick. Like it's cold. And I've done it in a rainstorm, and I will tell you that there are times in inclement weather where you better have a secondary option, because there will come a day at some point you won't get that fire started. So you have to have some type of insulation. You've got to have something prepped, or at least something available in the event that that's the case. In meantime, if that does happen, gather some resources, bring it into your sleeping area, dry it out. So.
Hey, and that's a great point right there. And I should have been a little bit better prepared. Like, so over my shoulder, there's a back room. That's where I do my shipping, receiving, and I got these bins. And one of the bins is, one's for fire, and, otter boxes. I have like probably 2 otter boxes in there that are already pre-prepped. I mean, with like birch bark and, like, to Steve's point, fat wood. All of this stuff is already in there. So, I mean, and like, there it is. You could just grab one of those things, and it's your emergency kit, so again, so if you're into the bow drill, the primitive style, fine, you do you. But I think Jeremy's point is still spot on. Then have all that already prepped. You've got everything, you're not spending time foraging and looking for stuff. Because if you're doing that when it's already wet or it's 40 below and there's 6 feet of snow, well, you're kind of screwed.
Look, and the only other thing I'm going to add to that, Mark, is, like, it's the 21st century. If we've talked about this before, if you're going out in the woods without some type of a contingency or a secondary or tertiary means of heating, I'll say it. They might not say it, but I'll say it. You're kind of stupid. Like, you're putting yourself at a tactical disadvantage to where you left out options to extend your survivability. Cotton balls and Vaseline, char cloth, and other means of actually start. Char cloth is actually easy to make. You can make that in the campsite. Just have a bandana on you.
Hey, just to bring it over to Paul for his comments, but like, so we're kind of, again, jumping ahead a little bit, but all of this is intertwined, and Jeremy just kind of took us down that road. So think PACE, right? Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. In this modern era, there's no reason why you don't have 4 means of starting a fire, because even if you live in a desert, you might still need to start a fire. You know, you live in Minnesota, you're, again, thinking of the hierarchy of needs. You are less concerned about water procurement. You might be more concerned about water filtration, but you're not going to be as concerned about, can you get it? It's everywhere. But fire is unbelievably valuable here in northern Minnesota. So you better have a primary, an alternate, a contingency, and an emergency. And those are spread out between around your neck, on your person, in your rucksack, in your car. A quick little stupid story. I remember somebody once saying, you know, they went off the road, and I'm like, well, didn't you have a lighter or anything in your car? And they're like, and they made this comment like, oh no, I had my faith in Jesus. And I'm like, I kind of remember he says, you know, how does it go? And I'm religious, but I might screw up the scripture, but it's like, doesn't, you know, God kind of like, help those who help themselves, or whatever, however that saying goes. It's like, how do you not have a lighter in your car? It's just a lighter. It costs like 60 cents. Paul, what do you got for us, sir, before we move on?
So I want to go back to the fire part. And as far as identifying trees, it's crucial. And it's difficult in the wintertime, right? Because you can't see the leaves. But in my area, there's a lot of hardwood. And there's also a lot of poplar. So if you know the difference between the two, you can get the fire started better with a poplar. If you're going to go, you know, sawing into something and cutting into it, if you don't find, obviously look for something that's down first, hopefully and dry. But the other thing is with pines, white pines, you're not going to get a lot of fat wood out of them. Red pines aren't. You can tell the difference between the bark. And I get excited when I see a red pine, because there's a lot of white pines around. But when I see a red pine, I'm like, there's fat wood. And you can cut into that. Man, it is great stuff. So even if I'm not an expert, if you know just the basics about the trees going in there, know that it takes longer for hardwoods to burn. So that you know, you want to try and avoid it. They may be for your long-term fire, but and of course they're going to have to, you know, dry out like you'd all mentioned before. But just know the basics there, and that'll take you a long way.
Dude, that's so great. I love what you said there, Paul. Oh, you're muted, Mark.
Sorry, thank you. But no, that's a great great point, Paul, because, you know, and Jeremy will test this, like cedar. Cedar is one of the best kindlings that you can find up here. The bark, you know, the broken branches on the ground, you know, woodpeckers, pileated woodpeckers going there and looking for bugs. So there's chips all around them on the bottom. Yeah. So you got to know your flora and your fauna, and that'll help your odds with, you know, being successful at any of this. But I think the last point I want to make on it is fire. It's such a human thing, you know, and we all love hanging around it. So get off your ass and get out there and just practice it, right? You know, you don't have to be an expert. You know, like very few of us are actually experts in anything, right? So get out there and just have fun with it. You know, maybe you can't do it in your environment because you live in an urban area or something, but find whatever opportunity you can just to go someplace and then just have fun and just make a fire. You know, and again, know your local laws and, you know, your burn permits and all that kind of crap. But, you know, but you see what I'm getting at. Go out there and practice and learn this, because there's so many different techniques on how to start a fire, you know, but you got to know how to do it. It's one of the most fundamental things out there. And it's interesting to me is because it's so often overlooked. Oh, I know how to do this. And then you watch a guy try to, you know, stumble through it, and you're just like, it's oh God, stop what you're doing.
Yeah. And there's, not to mention the added security benefits if you are out in the wilderness. I mean, does it all the time? No, I've seen animals come scampering through my campsite, but it does help prevent some predators from coming through. It does help with a semblance of protection and security. And honestly, if there is something in your camp, would you not want to see it? I know I would. I'd like to know what's there. So
hey, just having a little fun, you know, just trying to kind of mix it up. But because we're talking about fire, but don't be a terrorist organization and start a whole bunch of wildfires in Canada all at the same time. I just had to throw that out there. Yeah. Okay. So Steve just said cargo tape. So look, again, the moment you start going down this road, like it's the same with inner tube or any rubber, like a rubber band, right? Like I used to always have a rubber band around my wrist. And people are like, what that's all about? Well, it can be a reminder, but at the end of the day, or a Frito, like a potato chip. Once you start going down these rabbit holes and looking at stuff, 100-mile-an-hour tape. I mean, there's so many things that are super combustible. I think Steven also just said cotton balls and Vaseline. So we're not really, again, I'm not trying to show you how to make a fire kit. The whole goal is to get you to start thinking about this. And the moment you start going down this rabbit hole, it's tons of fun because there's lots of stuff that you can do. And fire is such a human thing. And it's cool for, I don't know, it's that one thing that even if we were in a shitty situation, all three of us were around a fire and it was a good fire. You suddenly, again, going back to that other, comment, the mindset, your mind just suddenly goes into a different place and you're like, okay, I'm going to make it through tonight. And that means I've got the ability to make it through tomorrow as well. So, all right, moving on, unless you guys got one more thing to say.
I would say that.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead.
Michelle mentioned something about knowing how to tap. I'm assuming trees to do that. I mean, that's another water source, right? Or at least it could be.
Well, different environments. Again, I'm not going to pretend to know everything, but in jungle environments, there are definitely plants, or in desert environments, there are plants that are going to have water and the roots or water within the cells, in the fruit of the tree itself. Northern Minnesota, we really don't quite have any vine or tree where you're just going to do it. But if I had to drink birch sap or maple sap, I mean, of course you would do it, right? But that kind of goes into it. That's a great point, though. Like, I think it's different. And so again, I don't live in that environment, but again, from a desert perspective or a jungle perspective, there's flora that definitely has and is a source of water if you need it, without a doubt.
And you can use grapevines too in my area. They're good, but it's kind of gross. But if you're desperate,
if you're desperate, you'll do anything. So all right, now we go into water, and that is cool picture of a really cool piece of gear. Oh, who makes that? I don't know. Selfish plug. Plug for my stuff here. Okay, now we're going into water. And so again, we live in northern Minnesota. You guys can all read the slide as we're talking here. But so my point that I want to get into is how are you going to collect that water? And are you afraid of waterborne disease? I'm just going to say this, as a kid, that wasn't really that big of a thing. I mean, we drank from streams and stuff all the time as children. So
the garden hose.
I'm just throwing this out there for you guys and for anyone watching. I kind of don't know where I come down on that whole water purification. Water purification tablets are easy. They're very small. They don't take up a lot of they don't take up a lot of space, and they don't weigh very much. So that's a really cheap system. I know there's a lot of different filtration systems out there. I'm not going to say any of the names because I'm not poo-pooing anybody, but I still keep coming back to we never really cared about this stuff before. So where did it change? And I'm just going to leave that one for you guys to chime in on. Everybody else can read the slide, but what do you guys think on water? Again, we live in northern Minnesota. I'm not really worried about water collection up here. It's everywhere. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on water?
Know what's upstream. Because if you have a farm upstream, then you have an issue. So as a child, I drank out of creeks and even going swimming in there, you get it in your mouth and so on. No real issues there. But as far as also being used to it. So if you haven't had a drink out of a creek in 10, 15 years or 20 years, and now all of a sudden you're guzzling that water, that might just make you sick for other reasons. But again, if you do have farms upstream, if you're at the top of a mountain or top of a hill, and you have a spring up there, you probably don't need anything. Yeah. But just know your location. Know what's before you.
Yeah, and so that's actually where I would have come in, and it would have also been standing water versus moving water, right? That would have been my other thing to add to that. You don't go to a stagnant pond where as you're going down and you're moving your hands slowly like this to move like some of the leaves, and then there's all kinds of mosquito larvae. Don't drink that water. Hey, there's a farmer with a whole bunch of cows and stuff, don't drink that water, but fast moving water, I guess I never really had a problem with that as a child growing up. There are, if you know your environment, and I'm going to bring this over to Jeremy, so where I grew up as a kid, like we actually knew where there were some actual natural springs out in the woods. And I'm not joking. People we used to drive to them and just fill up water, because it was freaking great water. So, so again, that goes into that group mentality though, as opposed to I'm an individual, I'm going to do this all myself. Because if somebody else, because look, I didn't discover that. I wouldn't have never known that, but somebody else did, who told somebody that who told somebody else. And then that information eventually flowed down to us. No pun intended. I didn't even realize I just said flowed down. Jeremy, you want to add anything? Because there's one other part about water I want to get into.
Yep. Yeah. So it's, and I've seen several good suggestions, Mish brought up, Steve brought up. And honestly, I just have to say before I get on my point, the comments section is killing it today. Right. I really, really have to point that out. So I do appreciate you guys commenting and adding in your points, because they are valuable, right? But
and before you go any further, in my defense, if you didn't see episode 1, I don't see any of the comments. I can't see it because I'm here doing the software-y thing. So I'm not seeing any of the comments. That's being kind of fed in from, Paul, Redbeard, or Spoon in the back room. So, but the ones I've seen that Spoon's brought up onto the screen have been solid. I mean, very much so. Thanks
you
for
guys
everybody
are killing it.
Yep. Yeah.
So, as it pertains to water, water is just it's a life force, man. Like, we need water. It's one of those things that we thrive on. I think more people should probably drink water personally, but that's just a personal thing. That being said, though, out of the pure,
even without being in a survival situation, I'm drinking like 3 of these a day.
Yeah,
you have to drink water. You have to stay hydrated. You're absolutely
so that being said, I want to iterate though that there are several studies out there that do show, and there is literature out there that does say that you can poison yourself if you drink too much water. So you want to have an idea of how much water you should intake. My thing is take it as you need it. So if you feel thirsty, if you're like, man, I've been really getting after it today, like, you take it as you need it. And just on the bottom screen here, look, I mean, water it's those comfort things, right? You make food out of water with water. You make coffee, you make tea. So water is essential, whether you're just on a weekend camp, whether things have really gone downhill and you're stuck in your house, or you go out to the bush. Like, in the end of the day, water is a necessity. I've drank from streams. I used to drink from the freaking garden hose back when I was younger, and now people kind of tip their heads to that. But
not to change the direction, but kind of going back into what Mish made that comment, and you made a comment on top of that. It is so important. So again, kind of tying this back into the focusing it back onto the subject, right? We're talking about, okay, what kind of gear do you have? What kind of go bag do you have? Are you going to bug in or bug out? And I kind of want to, what I'm about to say, I want to bring this over to Paul, because if you don't live in an environment, like that I do, again, in Redbeard, northern Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, you can't, go outside without falling into a creek, a river, or a lake. But if you live in a different type of environment, you have to start asking yourself and looking at, okay, what are the different techniques I'm going to employ or that I can use for water procurement? Because it is actually life. And even if it's just, hey, I need to know how to do this because the tea or the coffee I'm going to make tonight at my campsite, even if I'm taking, or can I make tea out of the natural vegetation, birch trees, or pine leaves, or pine boughs, pine and then birch leaves. So there's, or other herbs that, you could make your own rose tips, for example, so what I'm trying to get at is, your water is going to be really important. And there's so many things that you can do with it. But to the point, and I'm going to turn it over to Paul, is what if you live in an environment where there's not a lot of water? Then what are you going to do? Because if you're going to start carrying all this stuff around, I mean, seriously, 5 gallons of water is 40 pounds. That's a lot of freaking weight. That's only 5 gallons of water, So, I mean, you think about like, a canteen. Well, I'm not going to grab it, but you got one of my canteen carrier over there. Dude, that's 2 pounds of water.
And we're not counting sanitary things too.
Yeah, exactly.
So that 5 gallons will go like that.
Exactly. Yep. We haven't even got into sanitation. So filtration devices. Yeah. So again,
Yeah.
so you, or you're actually then, and this will come up in the later ones, the shoot,
Yep.
move, communicate, and medicate. Well, moving is navigation, right? And
Yep.
well, and you might be planning your movement based off of where your water sources are. Like, hey, I've got to get from here to here, and I've got to be able to do it in 3 days because I only have, you know, again, I only have 1 gallon of water on me, you know, and I can't go 3 days without water. So I've got to make it, the next tributary or the next lake is this far away. So these things are going to have to start coming into your decision-making process, and
Yep.
and it definitely influences the gear you carry, how you're going to do things. You know, what's the point of bugging in if you're relying on city water? Well, if you're bugging in and it's one of those type of worst case scenarios, there won't be any more city water. That's just not going to happen anymore. So what are you going to do? Do you have a well? And even if you have a well, if the electricity goes out, because wells are driven by electric pumps,
Yep.
do you have a backup system? Can you handle it? See where I'm going with this? I think people need to think about this. Paul, I know you've been very patiently waiting. What do you got, sir?
No, well, I have so much, but so I know that we've had some comments about beyond the purification and clean water is taste, and there have been mentions of different types of filters that use charcoal for that. It goes a long way, especially if you have a family and you don't want to drink nasty. Even if the water is clean, it still might taste like garbage. So if you have the man-made charcoal filter or a Grail, those type of things, it really will go a long way. If you have they have pumps that you can put in and pump a large amount of water. I have one of those, and that's gotten me through some long-term outages. And you mentioned hand pump wells, because you're right. If you're out of electricity, or even if you have a backup generator, is it going to power that well? Having a hand pump available is always helpful. What else?
Well, hey, and I just got to throw this in there as you're talking about pumps. And I'm kind of taking us down a slightly different road. I know we're teaching a class here, but I think this pertains, because if, for the people who are watching or the people who do watch this, and if you've made it this far, it's of interest to me to see how many municipalities, cities, townships are actually trying to ban wells on private property nowadays. That should be kind of alarming to you, because why would you try to ban a well? Why? Control. Exactly.
Keyword dependency and control. Yeah.
The one thing that I forgot, that I just remembered, was how much water do you need? Now, if your body will adjust, right? I don't drink as much water as the both of you, but I do drink water. But I'm not dehydrated on a daily basis. So why is that? Do I need multiple liters of water, or am I good with just one? And
well, that might be your superpower. I mean, seriously, I'm not joking. I don't mean that. I'm being a little flippant, but you might just be able to survive with less water than the rest of us. Some people can eat eggs. Some people don't get blisters after walking 20 miles. I mean, we all have weird superpowers. That might just be yours.
Yeah, it could be.
All right. What do you guys, are we done on water? We want to keep going?
I think we covered water.
Well, here, let me just bring this up, because, Paul, again, you're seeing the comments. People are talking about water pure tablets and Grails and stuff. A Grail isn't going to affect the taste, because I don't think it is going to. I mean, I have a Grail, but I'm not going to lie. I've never really taken it out in the woods and filtered water with it. I actually have Katadine bottles, which I've really done. I've done it with those. Those are great little bottles, right? I mean,
they are good.
I've fill it up too. And then you can immediately drink off of it. There's no pressing or anything. I do like Katadine bottles, but to your point, Paul, water pure tablets, they make the water taste like crap. And then there's a thing in here like maybe doesn't exist that much anymore, but I've seen it in the military in my background. ROPU, reverse osmosis purification units. There's even this thing where, and if somebody watches this video or leaves a comment who's watching now, but they even had these packets back in the day where you could throw this packet into a mud puddle and it would use reverse osmosis and inside of the packet was electrolytes. And Jeremy, going back to your thing, you can flush out your electrolytes by drinking too much, but
100%.
It had electrolytes in there, and it didn't matter how dirty the water was. It would reverse osmosis. It would suck the water into the packet. And after like an hour, 2 hours, you could just grab the packet and then just cut the top open. And you were basically drinking like a Gatorade type of thing. I don't know if that exists that was in a different world. So maybe I just got myself in trouble by talking about it, but that shit's out there and there's some pretty cool stuff. But again, the real point here is you better think about water. I mean, even in northern Minnesota, where it's all around us, you're still going to think about water because, as Mish said, how are you going to brew your coffee to make yourself, or your tea if you're not even thinking about water? And so, all right, moving on. Let's see here. Got to go to the next slide. Oh, hey guys, we're at an hour, just a little over an hour. I think we're on track. I think we're going to just take this through shelter, and that's going to be probably perfect. And then we should be done. There's Mish again. Katadine. Hey, I didn't quite see it. I said her favorite system. Was there something else in there? I couldn't quite see it.
I'll take a look here real quick.
Okay. Spoon brought it back up again. The pocket filter should be. Oh yeah, exactly. So, I'm not going to say his name just because I don't have permission to say it, but I know somebody who was on Isle Royal. It's a big island out here on Lake Superior, farther to the north, and there's not a lot of water sources really, but again, just having that Katadine bottle, you can just go to anything you're doing and just like on the go. It's such a great on the go type of water source, filtration source. So again, I'm not picking on any of the other systems out there, but I will just say, and that was never the part of the course. I'm not plugging one thing or the other, but Katadine bottles are really good. So
they operate good.
So before we go into this shelter, it is what you make of it. That is a picture of a shelter I lived in for probably 3 to 4 months in a different part of the world. Does that look like it's anything all that high speed? Not at all, but it freaking worked. So again, and I know Jeremy's going to add because he's already talked about this a little bit. Shelter is important in either the desert or in, the wilderness that we live in here in northern Minnesota. I've always been surprised, just for my 2 cents, and those that alone show of, I don't know. And again, maybe because those guys are playing a different type of game because they're trying to win the money, but it's always surprised me. I mean, how some of them just wait so long to even build a shelter. I mean, I don't know. It's weird to me. So, but maybe again, just kicking off the slide and or do you guys got something to chime in before we keep going?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, as it pertains to shelter and stuff like that, I mean, I'm just sitting here looking at the slide as it is, and it's already listing off a ton of stuff that I was going to say. Look, it's the difference between a good shelter and a bad shelter is a good shelter is going to, it's going to be a little bit more comfortable. It's going to be a little bit more palatable, but even a bad shelter to a certain degree is still better than no shelter. So a bad shelter can still be improved upon. It can still be worked. It can still be functional. I remember when I first got into bushcrafting, my shelters were kind of a hot mess, but once you start to figure out the little quirks and you figure out, like I used to, what I've done before is I've done like slits in my logs. So for an A-frame, I'd have 2 pieces down at the end, and I have 2 bracer pieces, and I actually I'd slit them into each other, and then I would kind of just layer other like branches and logs on top of it, so I have an entire roof, and then from there I can actually build like those sidewalls I mentioned against like a rock. So as a result, I'm warm, I'm comfortable, I have protection from outside threats, and there's one way that they have to come in there, and that's the way that I'm going to see. So if you if you take the time to make considerations about how your shelter is going to be built, the type that you want, and where you're going to set it up, it can go a long way. I said it before on here, and I'll say it again: prior planning prevents piss poor performance. You put a little homework in, even before you go out, or just something in a notebook, goes a long way. So
we got Steve throwing some comments. Widowmaker, in case no one knows what he's talking about. He's talking about trees that are about to fall over. And
it's a great point.
Wind blows. It's the forest. Winds blow. Trees fall down, and so you don't want to be underneath anything like that. And then the game trail thing. That's a great point, because going back to food procurement, why would you set up on a game trail? You might need to be harvesting those animals. And what else walks on game trails? Predators, right? So, and
you
then
might be their food procurement.
That, and I don't mean to say it, but that feeds directly into what Redbeard just said, which is, what type of shelter are you constructing? You know,
Yeah.
I think one of the things, you know, that I'll say is no matter what my bug out situation or bug in situation, you know, my go bag or my gear, you know, I'm just at that point where I'm not sleeping in the mud anymore. You know, like, you know, so there's very rudimentary, easy shelters that don't weigh a lot. You know, like I can construct them on the go. You know, if you were in the military, you know, we used to say, you know, light infantry, you know, travel light, freeze at night. Yeah, I can't even tell you how many times I just wrapped up in a poncho and a whoopee and fell asleep in the mud. Right. So
hey, those wool blankets are awesome.
Yep. Yeah. So you can do that stuff.
Dude.
But again, you got to take a step back, because that's not what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about like you're in the military and these are military operations and stuff. This is us as humans, survival in whatever it is that you deem is the most, you know, again, higher probability or higher consequence, whatever it is that you're training for or preparing for, you have to ask yourself that stuff. But I'm here to tell you, one of mine is, to Jeremy's point, it's got to be a really good, adequate shelter, because you know, unless I am just totally on the go. And if I'm totally on the go and if I'm on foot, well, I don't have 80 pounds on my back, so I'm already screwed. That's just straight up honesty. So I've already got to rethink how I would even do that stuff. And then you got to ask yourself, again, going back to that hierarchy of needs and your environmental considerations. Dude, you're in a jungle environment, you're going to sleep on the ground. That's probably a really bad idea. You know, I mean, like, you know, so to Steve's point, it's the game trail is you, because you're on the ground, you know, freaking army ants, spiders, you know, snakes, you know, whatever.
Centipedes, you know? That big.
Freaking... Yeah. Right. So, you know, shelter, you know, and look here, I'm going to bring it into our view. I think everybody's seen the slide long enough. And I was just going to bring that up, Steve. Yeah. I just saw your comment.
That's awesome.
Hammocks. Yep. That's where I was going to bring it to everybody, because I was just going to throw in. But now, Steve, hammocks, even, you know, and I'm not knocking hammocks. I've got 2 really great hammocks. But, you know, if you're in northern Minnesota and you're in a hammock, shit, I remember doing this even at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, in the summertime, sleeping in a hammock, and you got cold at night because it's a hammock, it's elevated. You don't, unless you've got that, I'm going to screw up the name already, but, you know, it's underquilt. Underquilt. I was going to say an underquilt. Yep. So if you don't have that, hey, Spoon, keep that up a second. Let me finish this comment. But if you don't have that, you're losing a lot of body heat. And then depending on the terrain, where you live, where you're deployed, the environment itself can be sucking away your body heat. So you've got to really sit and think about that. And there are some pretty kick-ass, you know, small individual shelter systems or hammocks, or maybe you want to have that thing, to Jeremy's point and to Steve's point. Maybe your shelter is your bug out vehicle and you're on the top of your vehicle. I mean, those things can be pretty expensive, but some of those are pretty badass, and you're both protected from the elements and you're protected from predators. So sorry, I'm just taking you guys comment here. I'm going to read Robert's comment here. I'm just now seeing it. So you guys want to add to that while I'm reading this, just so we don't have any.
If you want to take it there, Paul.
I'm sorry.
Are you reading it too? Comment? Yeah, we're all trying to read Robert's comment right now. All right. Hey, okay. So, hey, Spoon, where did the comment go? Okay. All right, go back to, can we see Robert at the beginning? Okay, bug out bag, get home, bag theory, bug out or get home is an escape and evasion event. Okay, well, yeah, so Robert, so I don't know if you saw the first episode, but you're absolutely right. We're not trying, I think our point here is you have to figure out what is the scenario, what is the actual situation that 100%. You're planning for, or you think that's going to happen. Because I'm not going to argue with you. If you're bugging out, you probably are in an E&E type of environment. Yeah, I agree with that, because bugging out means shit has gone horribly sideways. So and I'm going to probably avoid contact with other human beings that I don't know, because I don't know if I can trust them, if they're going to try to kill me and steal my shit. So I kind of agree with Robert there, but I will just caution, it's going to be different for everybody, what you're planning for or what you think, because you know, again, a soccer mom just needs she doesn't need a bug out bag. She just needs a go bag that's got lickies and chewies for the kids at practice. I mean, and it's going to vary. Guys, you want to chime in on that? I actually really like Robert's comment. Thanks, Robert. That was really good.
So I do the first, I'll lead into Robert's comment. So the first thing most people do when it starts to rain is do what? They look for shelter. So you absolutely need shelter. Now, do you need an emergency shelter or a long-term shelter? I would say yes to both, but just make sure, you know, for an emergency shelter, you probably could set that up in your sleep. But let's say you buy something like a tent to carry, to cover all your family. Make sure you set that up multiple times before you go out, because I've had to set up tents in pitch black dark with no flashlight, and if I didn't set that up before, I would have been stuck. But so just make sure you know that, because there are situations when it starts to rain, you're like, oh, whatever, I need to set this up now and do that. As far as what Robert was mentioning, if there's unrest, then you may, there's a lot of things on YouTube about stealth camping and so on. But, as far as setting up your shelter, if there's unrest, you need to look for isolated areas then to go towards Robert's comment there and set up your shelter.
But Paul, to your point, taking on and adding to what Robert just said in his comments. No, that's exactly it. So again, the scenario changes. It's a different, you're now going to have other, both environmental,
100%.
man-made, natural. You're going to have a whole bunch of different variables that you're going to have to, take into consideration, put into your decision-making process, and then spit out what hopefully is a successful, course of action that, saves your life or gets you home. So all right, we got another one from Robert. All right, Robert's okay. Hey, Robert, I wish you would have been here earlier. I really like what you said. Spoon, bring Robert back before Tracy. We got to, okay, then we'll do Tracy. Bug out. No, Robert. Yeah, that's exactly the point we've been trying to make in episode 1 and this episode here is it's taking that rational and logical and realistic approach to what are you really trying to accomplish. And you may have missed this. One of my favorite comments is when I hear people say, well, I'm just going to grab my shit and go. I'm like, you've never even done 20 miles with 80 pounds. Okay, whatever, dude. Yeah. So no, I think we agree. And then now we got another comment from Tracy. Some things are difficult to plan for. Flash flood. Yep. Fire. Yeah. I lost it, but yeah.
All great points.
Okay. You read it there, Redbeard.
Yeah. So they were talking about flash floods. Basically, lightning strikes, fire caused by lightning strikes. Basically the unpredictability of nature, and it's true.
Yes.
I can't express that enough. I mean, I hate to say it, but you have certain areas in the United States where people kind of they still build their houses in very damage prone areas. Not picking on anybody, but I get that's where your home is, but sometimes knowing when and where to set up your shelter, whether that be your home or a provisional shelter, is good. And on that point, one point I want to make too is if there's unrest or something like that, I'll be, I've thought about that type of situation quite a bit, and there is nothing more comforting, and it takes a lot of the work out of the equation than a pre-existing shelter that is defensible. And I know that some people might be, oh, well, you want to get out of the city. There's I don't know how many people have driven through the country, but there's a lot of like decent shelters that just exist. Like I've driven all over Minnesota, and there's stuff that just exists. And it's like some of them are in pretty good shape, others are dilapidated piles. But the point being is, like, even if you're on the outskirts of the city, I tell you what, if I found an abandoned concrete structure and it looked suitable, guess what? You have 4 walls, you most likely have a roof, and you have a hardened structure. So that way, in the event that you have to defend it, you have solid walls. Like, to me, that's a comfort item. Yep.
So let me just throw one more thing in there, though. Again, and I'm not arguing with you. I think you're right. But going back into, again, the thought process. So where are you? Like, so in northern Minnesota, Jeremy, we're not worried about black widows. We're not worried about rattlesnakes. We're not. So, but if you are in a different part of the country, that abandoned concrete structure is also potentially the nesting place for 100%. All kinds of shit that could kill you if that stuff exists where you live. So and I think that was a great point, and I just wanted to add to it, because what we're really trying to point out here again whoever watches this video is it isn't just as easy as, well, I'm just going to do this. Right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you should be thinking, and the more you go and the more you do mental rehearsals or talk with each other, and that's what we're trying to do here, talk with friends or share things with other people and have a good adult interactive exchange, the more prepared you'll be, and you'll be like, oh, hang on a second, do I really want to walk in there? What if you go in there and you think it's all hunky dory and there's a bunch of bats, and bats are your, like, you know, the thing that freaks you out and causes you, like the mosquito story I just told, you know,
or just straight up disease from bats.
Help, and bat guano and all that kind of stuff, right? So you got to be considering that. So I know I just missed some comments right there because we were talking again. Spoons, bringing them up on the screen. Yeah,
I just wanted to kind of just add one more flavor to that quick, Mark.
This is real quick. Robert gets another thumbs up. Robert's got like 5 gold stars right now. So Robert's on top of it.
You know, it's interesting. You know, a lot of, you know, we've harped on this quite a bit, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna grab my gear and I'm gonna walk out into the woods. And it's like, dude, like, if I can avoid having to go out into the woods in place of having a sound, solid structure in which I can set up in, I'm going to take the sound, solid structure before I have to actually physically go in the woods, because there's so many advantages. And we're talking about food. We're talking about water. What's the best way to mitigate the amount of calories in water you expend with the work being done? Having a pre-made structure, right? So it's like, it's less work you have to put into it. But like you said, Mark, look, if you see a structure, look, sweep and clear it a little bit.
You have to, thank you.
Look and see what's in there.
You gotta freaking clear it, dude.
Like, and the thing of it is, you know, in the end of the day, like, if you determine, like, no, this is feasible. I'll be honest with you. We also live in homes in which spiders still get into. So we should all be accustomed to the idea that, look, there's creepy crawlies that get into our perfectly fabricated homes. You might run into a nest, you might run into other situations, but look, I will take a solid structure any day over having to go into the woods. The woods is my last resort. If I can have something more solid.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I know where you're going. We see it. Steve and Robert, you know, and everybody so far, great comments. I want to bring this over to Paul. I think the last thing I want to say, because, you know, we're kind of at an hour and a half. There's really, I think, only one more slide, and that's the end of it. But to your point, Jeremy, is, you know, we've kind of this episode done a little bit more focused on, you know, civil unrest, you know, the worst case type of scenarios, or that kind of stuff. But I would just throw out there to everybody again is your vehicle is a giant go bag, right? There's you know, you can carry way more stuff in your vehicle. And if you're like the rest of us, you're probably in your vehicle a couple times a day. You know, it gets you to work, and it might not get, you know, again, depending on the scenario that you're planning for, you know, to Paul's point, we don't with 100% certainty know what will happen in EMP. I mean, it's scientific and stuff, but if your vehicle might run, but if it doesn't run, then it's at least the base that you're starting from. And if it's, to Jeremy's point, and if it's 8 o'clock at night and you're not good at nighttime navigation and you don't know how to read the stars, you know, celestial navigation, you don't have a compass, and you might want to wait until morning. Well, guess what? Your vehicle's a great shelter. It can be defensible. It might be able to move, but it also has all your gear. And you could spend that evening in your vehicle organizing your gear and really thinking about and calming down, taking a breath, calming down and saying, okay, this looks like this is some serious shit and I'm going to have to walk 30 miles. And I'm going to start that tomorrow morning. So I'm going to go through everything in my car and I'm going to figure out what I can carry. What is the 2 is 1, 1 is none, you know, you know, all that kind of stuff. You're going to be going through those thoughts in your head. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Robert. You know, Robert, you're absolutely right. But there are creepy crawlies that can kill you just like humans can. So, you know, I'll just say, like, I don't know about you, but I probably can't beat an alligator. You know, if I was in that environment and alligators existed, I would probably have some way of making sure I could kill an alligator because, you know, hell, I can't even kill.
It's called a 44 Magnum.
Yeah, well, right. But, you know, on a serious note, I'm so physically decrepit right now with my injuries. Like, you know, 4 6-year-olds could kick my ass. So, you know, like, so that doesn't, but Robert, to your point, that's a personal thing you've got to figure out for your environment and your physical conditions and characteristics. Paul, we haven't been to you in a little bit. What do you got to add here? We're getting kind of close to the end. What do you want to say there, sir?
So I'd like to say that, you know, as far as the modern cars, as long as you can get into them, some of them don't have keyholes, but so you can get in there for your shelter. It's at least a shelter, even if it, like you mentioned, EMPs, and if that is something that does impact it, you know, you can at least get in there and you have your shelter. As far as traveling beyond that, you know, I would say more recently, I've decided, well, all right, I need to get back into mountain biking again. And going back to Redbeard's original point, there's no way that I can mountain bike anywhere at this point or for a reasonable distance. I mean, I could walk, but to be able to do that and get somewhere quickly, or maybe get out somewhere, carry some gear on my back and use that as transportation if my car is inoperable, or a tree's down and my car is operable, but I can't get around the tree yet. I can do that. So those are the type of things that it just reminded me of that. And but yeah, the car shelter alone, it doesn't have to operate. But it can shield you from the rain or snow or any kind of, and well, not heat, because then you'll cook. But yeah, exercise is key, and I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
but there was Spoon's having a little bit too much fun right now and throwing me under the bus with it would only take one 6-year-old. But to your point, Paul. So this was, I think, and Jeremy, you'll laugh it up, fuzzball. Yeah. But I think, what was that when we had that windstorm? Was that 6 years ago? And it knocked down all of those trees. So it was 6 years ago. Yep. But so, Paul, to your point, I couldn't get into my shop. There was trees down. So I just stopped right there. But I wasn't, again, in a vehicle, it wasn't a worst case disaster. I mean, vehicles still worked. There was trees down everywhere. I just stopped right there. I knew the property owner was going to get in there and clear, the road. And I literally just opened up the back of my truck, and I've got all that stuff in my vehicle, and I made breakfast and coffee right there out of the back of my truck. So I think that, so when you actually have that capability and you've thought it through and you've prepared for it and you've war gamed it in your brain, what are the scenarios I'm going to face? So you're just better prepared for when it does happen. You're like, oh yeah, whatever, trees down, I'm just going to make coffee. I'm going to truck camp here for the next hour, because I got to go to work, but it's going to take an hour or two before the guy comes here and cuts these trees down out of the way. So yeah, Robert, again, hey, so guys, as we're kind of wrapping this up, I just want to throw this out there for, the people who are watching. There's been some really good comments. You guys are seeing the chat. I'm only seeing the stuff that Spoon's bringing up.
Thank you, Robert.
I just want to throw it up there to Steve, Tracy, Robert, Mitch. Hey, seriously, it's us talking, but we really, if you want to come on and be a face and be a face here and make a point or ask a question or give your perspective on a subject, we're going to do, a third episode, which is going to be the shoot, move, communicate, medicate section of, go bags, gear, and getting there. We'd love to see you guys again. And, don't be shy. If you want to do it and you're making a comment, just say something. Spoon will shoot you the email or whatever, and then we'll bring you on. We're trying to do this for everybody because, I don't know. I think it's time to just give back to everybody. And then we can only 100%. Get better by talking to each other and having adult, honest adult conversations. So, hey guys, let me just pull up the slide deck here. I actually think we are done. There might be one more slide here on shelter.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, that was me with the old Thor system. So this is, again, we did food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate. So we'll throw the clothing aspect in that to later. I guess maybe we'll just end it right here. So kind of going to Paul's, or I'm sorry, not Paul's, but Robert's comment. And then I'll let you guys talk. But again, we didn't plan this. YT guy, I'm the quiet guy in the back of the class. If this was a class, YT censorship, I would be making sure I asked you the questions. I always, no, there's no wallflowers here. Everybody's a participant, right? But okay, that's Spoon's getting crazy with the little things, the banners. He's having too much fun. But this kind of goes into the things that Robert was saying. So, if you think if the scenario that you are planning for is more of a civil unrest, that zombie apocalypse type of thing. So part of the equipment in your go bag has to be your clothing. I think Jeremy, and this is where we'll end it on this, but when you think about it, and this is where we'll pick up next time, but if you do, I always do this, I've got a summer kit that I put in my truck and I have a winter kit. And if you see where I'm going with this, why don't we take it out on that? Why would I have two different kits in my vehicle, Jeremy? What are your thoughts on that? Well,
simple. It's adaptability. If you can adapt to your environments and your environments are changing and what those changes are, you're a day late and a dollar short. You're at a simple disadvantage. It's whether you're talking about your tactical gear, whether it's your get home stuff, whether it's whatever it might be. Look, there are simple, if we're going to go on clothing just real quickly, different colors work for different seasons. So it's, it's one of those things to where, being able to understand how to adapt, when to adapt, and being able to implement that appropriately is going to be key. Understanding how to layer, understanding how to thermoregulate during the winter, so you don't start sweating and literally die in the middle of the night from freezing to death. Understanding what to put in your bag, when to use it, how to use it in the seasons is absolutely imperative. Look, we've had power go out in Minnesota. We've had it happen around here, as Mark mentioned with the windstorm, right? Like, when it comes to heat or when it comes to cold, it affects everybody, whether it's super hot, whether it's super cold, to varying degrees. You got to be prepared for it, right? So yeah, be adaptable.
Yep.
Be hard to beat.
And the point, and why I wanted to turn over to you, because really all I'm trying to emphasize is, like, if you live in an area where the weather can change every day, right? And there's places in America where it changes even more constantly than here. But, like, it could be 70 some degrees or 80 degrees here, and then it could be 50 some degrees at night. You have to think this stuff through, and to, again, to the comments that are being made, if you are more concerned about, I'm not concerned about environmental considerations, I'm more concerned about the human considerations. Well, then your vehicle go bag, or however you want to define that, it's very different. Look, I really believe in a truck gun. I mean, seriously, whether it's a 10-22 or, an old shotgun, something that, like, okay, if this really just happened, I at least now have, because maybe you don't conceal carry, maybe you don't carry, but then why wouldn't you have a shotgun under a seat someplace, or, in a storage compartment with, like, at least maybe a box of shells, because you might have to walk 60 miles. Well, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to eat? How are you going to defend yourself? Again, and that goes into both scenarios, whether you think it's zombie apocalypse, humans are gone crazy, or there was a coronal mass ejection, and now just nothing, nothing works. Because my argument would be 72 hours of nothing works is zombie apocalypse. It might be a natural environment, but 72 hours of people not having access to the internet, cash cards, cell phones, that's when you're going to see the real world zombie apocalypse take place. Hey, I did see, and then we're going to turn this over to Paul. I got one last little smart ass comment to make. We got Robert, who's made some really good comments here tonight. Robert says that he's willing to join us next time. So Robert, if you're still watching, Spoon, I think he's talking to you in the chat. We'll give you the email, send us an email, and we're going to do this again next Tuesday at 1900. I'll send you a link ahead of time. We definitely would love to see you, here, Harvard, to whatever degree, that you want to be in part of. You've had some great comments. Next week, again, is going to be shoot, move, communicate, medicate. To everybody else who's watched it, again, Mish just popped up here. We've got a request for Big Spoon to make a cameo. Mish, I don't know what we did to piss you off, why you want to see Big Spoon on here. We'll do Big Spoon as a cameo next week. I apologize. Really sorry for whatever we said to offend you, but we'll do Spoon next week. Paul, what do you got on your, let's start off with Paul. I really don't have much of an outro. I think we've kind of covered it. We'll do shoot, move, communicate next week. Let me just give, you guys the chance to take us out. Paul, what about you? Go first.
Yeah, back to the clothes that you carry with you. And, one thing that's crucial is socks. To change out if they get wet.
Oh, yeah.
We could do a whole freaking podcast on foot maintenance.
Yes, we could.
I'm high-fiving you right now, sir. Damn right.
So there's a lot more, that I could go into detail, but we get the point, right? Socks are the most important, I think. And then, beyond that, weather appropriate gear, as you mentioned, you have a summer kit and a winter kit. I thought it was always winter in Minnesota, but that's just my ignorance.
Well, you're not far away from being right. Yeah.
I think he's messing with us, Redbeard.
Well, to be fair, it snowed basically all but 1 month or all months, something like that. So
I think it was 10 out of 12.
Yeah.
I think it was 10 out of 12.
It's up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody, I think that was Spoon, like that used to be the mantra, if you could do it, if the tactical situation availed itself to it. Yeah. You were constantly changing your socks and rotating your socks.
Right, Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And somebody else just said mobility
Yep.
equals survivability. Damn right. And that's why shoot,
Yep.
move, communicate, medicate. We'll
Yep.
do that next week. So, all right, Paul, continue, sir. Anything more to
No.
add to that? Or
No,
your big
that-
thing was
that-
just to leave us with socks.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to leave you with just socks. So, yeah. So again, back when we go back to the shelter discussion, if you're dressed in all cotton and if you take too long to set your shelter up and you're soaked underneath there and you don't have a change of clothes, then there's a problem there. You could suffer a lot of different ailments that way. So having that change of clothes with you in a dry bag in your backpack with that shelter, so that you can change under that shelter and eventually dry that other gear. The best you can. Obviously, different situations may not allow that. If your clothes are all in your car and you're in your backpack and you don't have, just make sure you have some clothes with you. A bare set, something to wear, and as Jeremy mentioned, wool. Wool will keep you warm. So even when wet, it'll keep some warmth in there. So yeah.
Oh yeah, it's way better than like some of the synthetics.
Yeah.
The modern stuff. Yeah.
Cotton doesn't.
Cotton is horrible. Yeah.
I think wool also has antimicrobial properties too.
Yep.
So
all right, Redbeard, what do you got, sir? Because we're going to start. So here, just real quickly, we're going to pick up here on clothing. Yeah, we'll start off as that'll be our little refresher. We'll pick up on clothing at the beginning of the next one, and then but the main focus will be again shoot, move, communicate, medicate. But Tracy, honestly, I kind of agree with you for maybe different reasons, but yeah, you should have liquor and go bags. It's the X factor. This might be this taking a pull on it. Helps keep you mentally. Drinking liquor in certain weather situations actually is detrimental for you, but if it's the thing that mentally keeps you going, it's also a barter item, it's also medicinal. So yeah, there's well then Misha said trade barter. There's a lot of that. So all right, Redbeard, what do you got? We're at an hour 36. I think you're gonna take us out here, sir.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna wrap it up real quick. I know I've honed it on this, and you're gonna hear me say it probably 1,000 more times into the next final conclusion of this, but physical fitness, strength, and conditioning, it all factors into this. It increases your survivability. It makes you a much more robust individual. It's like Mark has said 1,000 times over. It's a pipe dream if you think you're just going to waddle your way out there, loaded down with gear. And you think you're going to make a miracle happen. Look, if you have gear, train with your gear, get used to your gear, understand your gear. And more importantly, you may shrink your gear because you realize you have items that do a number of the same things, but some of those items can do even more than that or better. Some items, yes, you absolutely should have them. Even if they do one thing, they may be the best tool for that job. But just be mindful in that. Be mindful of what you carry. There's a lot of different things to factor in there. In the next one, we're going to be talking about shoot, move, communicate, and a lot of those different things, especially as it pertains to shooting. A lot of considerations there, and we talked about that briefly because I tell you what, when you hold a gun for long enough, weight adds up. Weight adds up after a while. So that being said, everybody, look, I know we all agree on this. We really appreciate your participation. We absolutely love the fact that you came in here and you guys really made this everything of what it was tonight. We just tried to convey some information. You guys really took it and ran with it, and we love that. We love the interaction. So thank you very much for coming here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy days and your schedules to join us this evening. And on that, Mark, Paul, I don't know if you guys have anything else.
Paul, final comments, questions, statements?
No, I would say I'm looking forward to next class, and anyone that, bring your questions.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, not just questions, but just bring your open minds and just I think, Jeremy just summed it up. Don't want to beat that horse to death, but seriously, you guys are all awesome. This is what why we're doing this, what makes it fun. There was some, I think, new people tonight or made some new comments. So we hope we see you again next week. And for people who didn't join us, we're going to publish these things over on our Mission Critical podcast. They're live over on Centerline Systems, but we'll publish them at Mission Critical podcast. I think my final closing comment will be just a plug for what we're trying to do over there. We're just a bunch of guys. We don't have all the answers. We're not pretending that we do. We've got diverse backgrounds and we bring certain strengths and weaknesses to the table, and we're just human beings, and we're just trying to do something and give something back. So thanks to everybody for joining us here tonight, and I hope we see you again next time. I think that kind of does it for me, except for this. My final comment is this is just a lot of effing fun. I would rather do this than go to a bar any day of the week. This is just we've done this twice now, and every time just gets a little bit better as we're so it gets
a patina to it, it ages well.
Nice, a little patina. So I think we're gonna, Jeremy, Paul, I don't know what your guys' votes. Well, hang on, I'm sorry, Spoon keeps distracting me with some stuff, but same bad channel. Okay, good job, Spoon. And here, and just a shout out again, Spoon's taking the time out of his life to help out, and he's in the background doing stuff. So as much as Mish asked for it, we'll have to do a cameo with Spoon next week, so I'm just warning everybody right now, you better drink a lot before doing that. I'm having fun. He's going to kick my ass here once we're done and we're off screen, but, all right. Actually, hang on. Are you a 6-year-old? Because one 6-year-old could kick my ass. So are you trying to say that you're 6? Not really sure. All right. Anybody, we digress. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy life to join us here tonight. Thank you very much.
The 6-year-old could kick your ass.
See what I'm talking about? This is what I have to deal with. This is what I'm working with. Thank you, everybody, for watching tonight. We'll try to do a much more professional job next week. If you got questions, comments, just reach out to us anytime. Mission Critical Podcast or me over on Centerline Systems. And I just want to give my closing comment is a huge shout out to Paul. Paul has, been just so cool and been willing to work with us and has taken the time out of his life and helped out. And I just want to really just say thanks to Paul. I mean,
100%.
I mean, that's serious. It's been a couple times now for you helping out. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to do it.
All right. Well, then on that note, boys and girls, hey, honestly, Redbeard, how about give us our normal Mission Critical podcast ending? Let's end it right there. And before you do it, Spoon, are you going to be able to hit end? So Spoon's got the outro. So it's on you, Redbeard. Take us out.
All right. So again, thank you very much. And on that note, look, the flame of liberty shall not and will not be extinguished so long as there are people willing to support and defend it. And that means every single one of you. So thank you again, and we'll see you on the next one.
See everybody next time. Woo! Did you end it? No, you didn't end it. Oh, we're either still on. See, this is like a really high speed